Yeah. Welcome. Yeah. Yes. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the council meeting for the 6th of August 2025, and welcome to staff, councillors, members of the public that are watching on both in the chamber and watching online. Could I just get everyone to commence our meeting with our normal karakia, please? Thank you. So, apologies we have from Councillor Young, and noting that Councillor Boyle is online attending by Zoom. I'll move that apology be accepted, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? Against? Carried. We have two members of the public who wish to speak to us today, and could I invite Viv to the table, please?
Good afternoon all. How are you today? This one, the one we're talking about today, is a real worry to most of us. Anticipated benefits of the Joint Water Services entity. Page 13. A holistic approach to water should be read as statutory protection of a tauhanga, with obligations to the Treaty of Waitangi, not the treaty settlements as on page 35. To me, water is as important as the air we breathe. The initial impact of this delivery model transfer of assets, especially stormwater, really will be a big headache to us ratepayers as the runoff from growth increases. Sure, council don't have to deal with the effects or costs as per HDC's blueprint report. Exceptions for developers, but many other ratepayers have to carry the costs. This year will be 18% rates for us increase, and then soon a water entity bill too, which will probably be targeted. On page 31 of our agenda, Rangitikei have taken the approach not to include mixed-use rural water supplies, to care about farming and horticultural industry a little. The Horowhenua does mention using recycled water. I feel it's a bit of an afterthought. Does this mean that all water under the Three Waters model entity, even recycled rain, has to be written into the contract? Page 18. Wastewater will surely be each region's responsibility. That's my own thought. Plan 1 and 2 of the coastal management of the Moana still seems to need consideration. So what happens with our landfill and the pot? Now, I have a little bit of a rip out of a page from Regional Council's meeting yesterday, where they plan the Horowhenua Wellington quality improvement rate for every rateable unit in the Horowhenua district will be $45.89 per separately used and inhabited part of a rating unit. So that's already set. The prices are starting to go up already. This other one on page 265 is about the landfill and how we on the NLG would like a little bit more communication coming through per our consent. NLG community would like to see the operations planned and the agenda not on the day, but a week beforehand, so we can at least read it through, please. Thank you. I'm not going to read the other part. And I know that on the other side of the page, I'm not supposed to, that it's public excluded, but please don't sell our Living Warehouse car park or the Salisbury Street one. Horowhenua will need all of these for future transport schemes. Developers have taken enough money out of the ratepayers. We don't need a Wilson's car park. Any questions?
Any questions for Viv? He's not. Thank you, Viv. Charles, welcome.
Page 207.
Sorry.
Iwi Hapu Relationship Framework Adoption. How do you beat Maori? You pay some behind closed doors, which is happening here. This proposal in reality is a breach of the Treaty of Waitangi based on relationship. That is a breach. Iwi and Hapu is all within. So when you use that word iwi hapu, you've got to have a hui of the iwi, all the people of the iwi, and all the hapu, not a couple of plastic munching Maoris. Okay. This council, HTC, has not notified meetings within iwi or hapu on any issue. Right? This council, HTC, is creating chiefs with low-rank Maori in breach of tikanga Māori and whakapapa. Page 260, Council Action Monitoring Report. And I've got there, Living Landfill, question mark, Tartan the Drain, it's a question mark, Hakeo Stream, question mark, and restoration of the Hakeo Stream. Those are all questions. I don't think these people even understand or know what's going on. Page 265, decision to sell the Living Warehouse car park. Incumbent HTC governments, be very careful here because there will be more problems that can be created than solutions. And the key to that is who will benefit. That is the key. Other, river management and flood protection scheme, Horowhenua, that's what a question is. Did not work in the Hakeo Stream in 2021 and still does not today. Horowhenua Freshwater Management Unit Water Quality Interventions. Interesting, because we will see how that goes. And those from that, I've got another thing. HTC must not delegate out the responsibility of core services, because this is what you're doing. In a couple of instances, this is what you're looking at in this document. Delegating out your core services to another group. And before you know, it'll be foreign ownership from overseas. Kia ora tātou. He pātai. Any questions?
Thank you, Charles. Any questions for Charles?
What? Everyone's stunned. Apati hono tātai hono hunga mata ki te honga mata. Apati hono kia ora kia whaipanga kate.
Kia ora, Charles. Thank you. All right. Moving on. Late items, there are none. Any councillors have any declarations of interest they wish to declare? None. Thank you. Moving to the confirmation of minutes. That the meeting minutes of Council 25th of June 2025 be accepted as a true and correct record. Seconded by Councillor Olsen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And that the public excluded meeting minutes of Council 25th of June 2025 be accepted as a true and correct record. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving to our first report, which is the Merrill Report 6.1. I'll just move that this report be received and noted. Seconded by Councillor Jennings. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any items in that report, including the Regional Transport Committee minutes and the LGNZ 4 monthly report, that anyone wishes to speak to? All right, nothing there. So we now move to 7.1, Joint Water Services Delivery Plan. And welcome, Rob. While Rob's just getting settled, can we just move that the report be received and that this matter is recognised as not significant in terms of Section 76 of the Local Government Act, seconded by the Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Mayor Burney. Councillors, it goes without saying that the Water Services Plan in this journey has been well documented and the process has been well communicated over the last 12 months. And I guess it's quite a significant point where we land today with the Water Services Delivery Plan. Over the last month, we have adjusted the plan to meet 2 rounds of feedback with the DIA, which has been both constructive and positive. Equally important, also in the last couple of weeks, we have been working closely with Simpson and Grierson in achieving a letter of compliance, a legal letter of compliance from them. So I put it forward today that the document is tabled and read, and hand over to Monique in respect to a couple of other things that go alongside the document.
Thank you, Rob, and just to acknowledge Rob's leadership in the work of our kaimahi to get to this point. As you can see by the thickness of the document in front of you and the iterations that you've been provided, the delivery of the Water Services Delivery Plan has not necessarily been a simple task, but it's been a critical task in order to ensure that we meet our legislative compliance requirements. And further to Rob's commentary about the certificate of compliance, about an hour and a half ago I received a final letter from Simpson Grierson providing that certificate of compliance and confirming that the Joint Water Services Delivery Plan complies with the Act and that the information contained in the Joint Water Services Delivery Plan is true and accurate and meets the intent of the Act. As councillors know, we're responding to a bit of an evolving situation. Recently, Ruapehu District Council and Wanganui District Council made the decision to not proceed with a water organisation with Horowhenua, Palmerston North and Rangitikei, which is why in front of you today you have a Water Services Delivery Plan for the 3 council model. Yesterday I received formal notification from Ruapehu District Council that they have received a notice of motion that meets their standing order requirements, and next week Ruapehu District Council will hold an extraordinary council meeting to reconsider its decision around the future of water services. At that meeting, I understand that they'll be considering a motion that revokes their decision to partner with Wanganui District Council only, and instead consider a motion that looks to partner with Horowhenua, Rangitikei, Palmerston North and Wanganui in a 5 council joint model, and if Wanganui does not proceed with supporting that they partner with Horowhenua, Rangitikei and Palmerston North in a 4 council model. As per my advice to council via email overnight, first and foremost, while that is a slight change in the process we've been following over the last few weeks, front of mind for us is our legislative obligations for Horowhenua District Council. And so therefore it is our recommendation that you still consider the adoption of the Water Services Delivery Plan as is presented to you today. but you'll note the additional 2 resolutions that I have provided for consideration by elected members that essentially aim to provide the option for Ruapehu and Wanganui to join as a 5-council model should their decision-making process allow it, but it shifts the response Wanganui District Council and the Department of Internal Affairs to figure out the mechanism in which they will do that in a way that does not alter any compliance concerns for us as an organisation. I note that you've had some advice in writing, but I still felt important that I speak to it, particularly for those listening into the meeting, so that they can understand the context when further questions may come. And just some additional context, next week, Rangatiki and Palmerston North will consider the adoption of the Water Services Delivery Plan, but we've obviously worked in step with each other to make sure that whatever they are presented and consider is the same document that Horowhenua is presented. Rangatiki this week have confirmed that their stormwater assets will also be included. In Palmerston North City Council are making that decision today, I understand. Certainly at an officer level, we're all aligned, and that is consistent with what you read in the draft Water Services Delivery Plan presented to you. Between Rob and I, we are happy to answer questions.
Questions? Councillor Rob, just a quick comment more than anything. I guess, thanks very much for that further intel around this conversation. I guess with the background, that's enabled us to obviously do that homework with the 5 council entity earlier on. At least we've had those financial assumptions, etc., to match that in the same decision. So there's nothing really to change as far as that insight goes for us making this decision today anyway, is there?
Through you, Your Worship, it's a relevant point, Councillor Olsen, in reminding Council that we consulted on the 5-council model as an option, and we also considered the 4-option model as an option. And as you know, because you've heard me talk about this many times, there is no mechanism in this process to neatly get councils to try and make decisions in a way that allows everyone to move at step at the same time. I hadn't anticipated this would happen, that Ruapehu might consider their decision, reconsider their decision, and while I think that at an officer level there is potentially some frustration that it's come late in this piece, at the end of the day, this is a decision for elected members, and the cumulative impact of all of the council's decisions when water services delivery plans are presented to Department of Internal Affairs matter, and we know that the government of the day supports bigger entities than smaller entities, and obviously as officers initially our recommendation was a 5-council model. Should Ruapehu change their mind, that does not give I don't think council should take that that's an indication that Wanganui will also change their mind. And I'm mindful of, I suppose, the challenges around how close those 2 councils are to needing to meet their legislative requirement of finalising and submitting a water services delivery plan by the 3rd of September. So the approach that I've recommended to council is in I suppose, a graceful way, trying to manage and protect Horowhenua's interests first and foremost, but doing it in a way where it looks at the bigger picture and allows the process to think about what is in the best interests of everyone involved in this process.
My question was around the collaboration agreement in terms of now how that moves forward. Indication in the report is that's pretty much an agreement that the chief executives are going to be formulating, and I probably just need some reassurance, I suppose, that
governance are involved or as part of that sort of formation of that collaboration agreement as well.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and it's a relevant point, and my apologies, I should have referenced it in the introductory commentary. The intent behind giving the Chief Executive delegations to sign the collaboration/commitment agreement is an acknowledgement of the time frame we're working in, where we're going to be going through an electoral cycle, but to give absolute assurance to the council table that the collaboration agreement is not the shareholding agreement, and it's the shareholding agreement where I suppose all the meaty conversations and decisions are to be made. But what I would note is that the collaboration agreement, and particularly in the cover report, we reference the governance arrangements. And so when we're talking about governance arrangements, we're not talking about the shareholding council or the board of the water organisation. We're talking about the governance of the project to get us to the development of the shareholding agreement. And you'll recall we had a council workshop last week, and actually there were some questions from elected members about that, where we talked about the role of the mayors and some iwi representation that sat on that project governance group. In conversations with Mayor Burney yesterday, what I had asked the team to do was add an addition to that resolution, which is in addition to the delegations, where it says in the implementation plan full stop, that it says comma, noting there will be a full council workshop first. So you've had some insight into the collaboration agreement last week during workshop. The intent is we would do a further workshop with council specifically on that collaboration agreement, but recognising that essentially that agreement is an operational document and it's to set the process up. What we are requesting is delegations for me to sign that.
No further questions? Councillor Grimson.
Monique, just keen for you, I guess, given the discussions with Ruapehu and Wanganui, and yes, understanding we've had the modelling around 4 and 5 council option, and I know our direction is we'll proceed with what we've got today so that we continue to meet our statutory or compliance requirements to get it submitted. What does that pathway look like if it was to move forward as a 4 council or 5 council option in terms of still meeting the regulatory guidelines and the basis of what would now need to become a 4 council or 5 council water service delivery, given the timeframes we're operating to?
So, should those 2 resolutions that have been suggested be adopted by council, and further to that, the delegation that the report offers me around making final drafting changes to the water services delivery plan, there is that sentence that we would look to add into the water services delivery plan, which was signalled in that correspondence to councillors last night, that reads, all of the councils consulted on various joint WSCCO options and remain open to allowing other councils to join, subject to necessary due diligence and approval processes. All councils consider that increasing the scale of the CCO will likely deliver increased benefits as outlined in this water services delivery plan. We would, should Ruapehu and Wanganui or make the decision to join, it would require those councils to file an addendum to our water services delivery plan, but it would put the onus on those councils for their addendum to align with ours rather than ours having to align with them. But the way in which the resolutions are shaped is very deliberate in putting the onus on Department of Internal Affairs to essentially navigate the legislative framework to make it work. I understand that, like, obviously we have a legal requirement to submit by the 3rd of September. DIA is saying they will take until December to approve plans, and so September to December is where I think we will see lots of lots is probably not the right word to use. We will see movement in some of the council's decisions and how those decisions are shaped into water services delivery plans that can be accepted. So, and not casting this on us, but you will have seen in the media, the Minister of Local Government has written to a number of councils who have made a decision to go alone. And I understand DIA officials are working with those councils and other groupings of council to try and find a different way forward. And I think what you'll see is the Secretary of Local Government playing a facilitation role in figuring that out.
And I guess if I was a community or ratepayer at the moment thinking, all right, 2 neighbouring councils have come very late to the party, actually we're pretty good to go, why don't we go ahead? Given the modelling and the work has already been done to fully imbue that a bigger is better from a financial affordability sense across all 5 councils, what would the messaging be that you'd suggest we go out to explain our openness to remaining open to those advances?
I would reflect on some of the language that I've used in correspondence to elected members about, despite the frustration, or, we might reflect on the nuance of the process. At the end of the day, it's about, is this the right thing to do? And I accept there are different views on water services reform, but when we look to the policy principles and the intent behind what reform is trying to achieve around creating a more affordable water services delivery for New Zealand, if Council adopted these recommendations today, Council is showing that it has been robust, it has been well prepared, and is first and foremost meeting its legislative requirement in a way that reflects the spirit of the conversation it had with community, but also the decision that it made back in June. But it is acknowledging that there are some decision makers next door to them or just down the road to them who had made a decision that we, on the basis of that decision, had moved on, but are now going through a different democratic decision-making process that means that may change, and all we're trying to do is be flexible enough so that we don't get caught out or any of the onus on that falls back on us to fix. It's I suppose we're trying to actually put Horowhenua in the prime position to be a leader rather than having to fix and follow.
Councillor Jennings.
Yeah, just one question, Monique. The document contains kind of, I guess you sort of frame it as really firm commitments or indications about what's going to happen and what's going to unfold in terms of the plan. And then there's some other commentary in the plan that talks about kind of aspirational statements or commitments or intents, framed as intents to do things. Can I just understand, in terms of those kind of different categories of those more aspirational statements of intent, they don't necessarily commit us to anything at this stage because all of the arrangements get formalised and locked in through the shareholders' agreement, and I think you described it as that's the point at which some of those really big conversations will have to happen. Is my understanding correct? Like this is a sort of a statement of intention of what we think might happen, we think what we're planning to do, but ultimately it's not actually locking us into anything in terms of some of those aspirational arrangements or intents around how things might work, that the shareholders' agreement will be the place that those things are formalised.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. I'd probably need you to reference some of those particular examples you might be referring to. However, in broad terms, what you are saying is absolutely correct. The Water Services Delivery Plan. Its primary goal is to prove to the government that we are meeting the requirements of the Water Services Act, and in particular, and what we know, because this is what Department of Internal Affairs keep telling us, is the most important setting and analysis piece is the financial sustainability. That is where the emphasis will go. In terms of the decisions that will bind council, that is in the shareholding agreement. Hypothetically, during that shareholding process, and I'm not sure if this isn't necessarily an answer to your question, but I just want to reference them why the Water Services Delivery Plan is important. Hypothetically, if we through that shareholding agreement process can't find agreement on something, I suspect the Crown will take a role in helping facilitate us to get to an outcome. But the consequence of not agreeing is that we would then have to submit an updated Water Services Delivery Plan, and that might mean we don't meet legislative compliance depending on the timings of that. Like, there's some process stuff around the importance of the Water Services Delivery Plan. So I don't want to take away, yes, it's not binding council to particular high-level aspirational comments, but I also don't want you to think this isn't important, because it is important, because it's council saying to government, this is how we're going to deliver water services, and this is how we're going to meet your financial sustainability test that you've set out in the Act.
Councillor Brilliant. I mean, since we touched on it, just for clarity in the layman's term, the shareholders agreement then would cover how operationally those services are going to be delivered, or is that another subsequent plan from the shareholders plan, where the rubber hits the road basically and the work starts getting done? Where does that get developed?
So some of that you could anticipate is in the shareholding agreement. Some of it will be in the annual statement of intent that council provides to the water organisation. But the big decisions that the shareholding agreement will need to agree on is transfer, like the process for transfer of assets, the process for agreeing valuation of assets, what that means in terms of voting rights, shareholding portion, what the governance structure looks like for shareholding council. It could also, for example, entrench some expectations around local pricing. It could speak to the vision around harmonisation. It could, but it's not going to say, and we will keep having a wastewater treatment plant down Mary Street. I obviously used a hypothetical. It won't go to that level. It will be it's at that principles level.
Yes, Tamiana.
Thanks, Mavuni. Monique, just a couple of questions from me. Just looking at option D around transferring our stormwater services, can we just, for our listeners, really share how that may or may not impact on decisions around Lake Warowhenua, the pot, and things like that? And particularly, how would the owners be able to participate in this process if it's a new entity dealing with our stormwater network?
Councillor Tamihana, sorry, can you just refer me to what part of the report you're looking at?
In the recommendations, C.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was just wanting to remind the table that you've already kind of made that decision, and this is just confirming it so that when we submit it. What it means is that the assets that council own, which of course is not the lake, the assets that council own and maintain, where its primary purpose is stormwater, they will be transferred to the water organisation. and the water organisation will be responsible for the management and maintenance of those stormwater assets, including its responsibilities around any mitigation or consenting requirements to discharging environments. And so, for our listeners, obviously Lake Korowhenua is where our stormwater and live-in goes. It will mean that the Water Services Organisation would take the lead in terms of, the consenting responsibility, the relationship with the Lake Trust, and iwi partners in relationship to that process. What Council's role would be is being clear about how that was reflected in the shareholding agreement, but most importantly in its annual statement of intent, continuing to be clear about its expectations around the delivery and provision of stormwater services.
Okay.
Just turn it on.
Sorry, apologies. I thought I did. The second question I've got three. Sorry, maybe if that's okay. I just wanted to ask if you could describe to us how iwi and hapu have been engaged in this process to date, just so that I'm clear that we've received feedback and we've considered how that feedback has entered into our water service delivery plan.
So, obviously the water's journey has been a number of government iterations, but more recently to this iteration, there were a number of regional hui that were held last year that all our iwi hapu partners were invited to, but I have been providing regular updates to our iwi hapu partners around the process we've been working through, and I understand our iwi and hapu have received a copy of the Water Services Delivery Plan at the same time that we've been progressing it with Council. Councillors will recall the voice, I suppose the feedback that we received from iwi through the consultation process. So we had a specific submission from Te Tumata Kahoki, and then we had a collective cluster of feedback from, we'll call it kind of the collective of iwi hapu across not just our district, but what was the 5 council or 6 council model at that point in time. And that work has been led by Rangatane, but they've all been feeding into that, and obviously they have shared with Council their expectations. There's been no decisions made about what role iwi hapu will play in both the next steps of the project and then the future delivery of the Water Services Organisation, and that's obviously something of significance that councils are going to need to lean into as they develop the terms of the shareholding agreement. But yeah, iwi hapu are certainly aware of it, and while they have voiced their concerns that it doesn't, the process doesn't necessarily align with what they would have liked or their expectations, they obviously see this as an important work given their connection to water in particular.
So subsequent to that, we could give them assurance that as part of the shareholders agreement, there's something there that triggers that connection, because I wouldn't like to assume that they're being engaged and then we are reported to here at Council that they're not getting a level of engagement perhaps that would be expected of them with a new water services entity, given that they're not going to be sitting with us. I just think there's some interface stuff going on there about they're going to need to know who they're talking to, because currently they're used to talking to this table in this forum.
Yeah, so certainly in the development of the shareholding agreement, the principles and the process for iwi hapu engagement and how they are or aren't represented at different levels will need to be decisions of Council, and I think that's going to require not just conversations at a staff level, that's at an elected member level as well.
And sorry to bear with me with my last question, is actually around, are there any risks to this organisation that you may be or may be not aware of? And I'm actually talking about things like Are there water ownership, stewardship cases that we should be aware of? Are there treaty claims potential that could risk a decision that we're making as council? And I even think about other rights, whether they be private rights of people that actually hold water consents and things like that now. That potentially, are we giving their right by handing that to another entity? And so I'm just in my mind signalling, are there any other types of risk out there in this process? I'm even alluding to the recent Marine and Coastal Act ruling, because we have stormwater networks that will go out into those areas. So it's some assurance for our listeners that this entity is actually going to connect the dots and engage all those spaces. And because I don't want to have this organisation be put at risk because of something that they're not picking up or have missed, perhaps.
So I'm confident that what's been presented to council today ensures that we meet our legislative requirements. What I do acknowledge, though, is that the water environment holistically is complex, and the decision before council is actually just about council's role and responsibility with water. It's not it doesn't, for example, in here is not clarity on the interface with the new Resource Management Act process or the freshwater improvement process, or the MACA Act and how those claims will roll out, or the Crown's responsibility around Treaty Waitangi settlements. And so, is there risk? Yes, but that risk is not for council. That risk is for the Crown, who's actually the one that's going to be responsible for weaving this in, because this is just about council's role and responsibility, not even regional councils, just territorial authorities. And so it is actually only one, well, it's really complex for us. It's only one piece of the jigsaw puzzle when we think about how water holistically is managed and maintained for all of New Zealand. This is just about a council municipal supply.
If I could just add to that too, that to a previous point, through Worship, this is specific to our assets as well, and they do impact on a wider water entity. But I guess what's at risk is the expectations of some of those groups, and that's where we need to get the shareholding agreement right and things like that. And then just further to your point earlier, Councillor Tamihana, around the transition from HTC to a wider water services organisation. We have already the new entity of team, or the new entity of officers that are working from a transition perspective, have already set up another hui with iwi on the 19th of August to just update iwi to exactly where we're at and the direction we're taking from a transition perspective.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, and it was really more for listeners to get a little bit more understanding of the complexity of it, and signalling, that there is potential risk out there still. But I agree, Monique, that what's been framed here today for us is worthy.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just listening to Councillor Tamihana's question to the Chief Executive and her response, I guess is where I'm really trying to understand this commitment versus intent piece in terms of the shareholders agreement. So, for example, Councillor Tamihana talked about mana whenua representation, I think, or iwi hapu representation. And so, for example, the plan says, this is on page 17 of 195, the governance structure will include a shareholder committee comprising representatives from the participating councils in mana whenua. So it's framed as a commitment. And so I'm just trying to reconcile that with your comments around that the form or composition of that will be determined if or will there not be representation in terms of that, and that's a shareholding thing. I mean, that's obviously, that is framed as a commitment, and there's almost a question around that particular example. Well, what does that actually mean? Is it all mana whenua across the whole catchment area? Is it going to be one representative? So that's an example. But there are other comments in here, not just about mana whenua representation, but other things like, for example, local pricing and harmonisation that are framed as wills. And so that's where I'm just trying to reconcile what you said about, all of these things will still be up for debate and decisions in terms of the shareholders agreement versus quite clear language in here, which is intentional to try and establish a commitment. So can you just help me kind of understand how I should view that?
I think that you should view the Water Services Delivery Plan as the reference point to commence the development and the design and the discussion. But this Water Services Delivery Plan means nothing if A, it's not accepted by the government, and B, the authorising councils don't develop and agree a shareholding agreement to actually bring it to life. So not just the commercial terms, but the non-commercial terms of the shareholding agreement is the avenue where elected members need to lean in, because that is where the binding decisions are made.
Thank you, Rob. All right, so we're now moving to recommendations C and D. That Council confirms that responsibility for the provision of stormwater services be transferred to the Water Services Organisation in such a way that Horowhenua District Council will not be considered a water services organisation in the future. And D, that Council adopt the Joint Water Services Delivery Plan attached as Appendix A to this report. I am happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Grimstone. Is there any debate or discussion on that items? Put those recommendations. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. That is a great step forward, and another milestone reached in the long ongoing saga of 3 water services that we have going on in this country. But great to get that across the line, and thank you for your support and that, and just acknowledging the work that has gone into it. And Rob, thank you, Daniel, and of course the Chief Executive who's been guiding that. It is a massive piece of work, and so great to see it getting along that line. Pathway journey continues. I'm just wondering about those 2 other pieces of resolution, or those recommendations that you're making in regard to Rope and Wanganui, where they would sit in terms of the process that we're going through at the moment. Do they need to be considered now or at the end?
I think they are best decided at the end.
Okay.
So, yeah, after you've considered G.
Okay, thank you. G. All right, so our next recommendation is recommendation E, and I will put E, F, and G together. So recommendation E is that Council authorises the Chief Executive to make minor changes, if required, to the Water Services Delivery Plan to allow for certification and joint submission. If the Council directs the Chief Executive to certify the Joint Water Services Delivery Plan, allowing for any minor changes to be made before jointly submitting the Water Services Delivery Plan with the Chief Executives of Palmerston North City Council and Rangitikei District Council to the Secretary for Local Government on or before 3rd of September 2025. And G, that Council delegates authority to the Chief Executive to enter into and sign the collaboration agreement with Palmerston North City Council and Rangitikei District Council to progress the joint work program outlined in the implementation plan, noting
There will be a full council workshop. Noting there will be a full council workshop first.
all right. Moved by Councillor Olsen, seconded by Councillor Grimstone. Any further discussion or debate on those?
Can I just be
Councillor
clear that
Tamiya.
we're still going to deal with the Ruapehu Whanganui thing next?
We've got 2 resolutions coming up in them.
Okay.
All right, I'll put those resolutions. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. All right, the extra 2 resolutions are recommendation H, that Council notes that there remains the potential that Ruapehu District Council and Whanganui District Council could be willing to partner as shareholders in the joint WSCCO, but that this is subject to those councils making formal decisions to endorse that form of joint WSCCO involving up to 5 councils, as well as the necessarily due diligence and approvals required by the current partner councils being HDC, PNCC and RDC. And I, the Council encourages Ruapehu District Council and Whanganui District Council to continue constructive discussions with the project team and with the Department of Internal Affairs to determine the pathway that would provide for them to become shareholders in the joint WSCCO, including clarifying what that would require for the current partner councils and their joint water services delivery plan, assuming it is accepted by the Secretary of Local Government on its current terms. Everyone understand what that means?
I think so.
You think so?
Yes. Just in relation to those resolutions, are the statements made in E to G, particularly E, if they do come on board and they accept the water services plan, and they want to make changes, would those changes be considered minor in nature? And but if not, does the CEO still have delegation to continue with the submission of the plan?
So through you, Your Worship, and as per clarification earlier, the addition of the sentence, all of the councils consulted on various joint WSCCO options and remain open to allowing other councils to join subject to necessary due diligence and approval process. I think that is minor, so long as these next 2 resolutions pass. It's then DIA's responsibility to figure this out, and if that requires a rewrite of this, then we'll navigate that process. But again, we've still met our legislative requirement. I think we can anticipate that what we submit in September, regardless of whether Wanganui and Ruapehu come on board or not, there will be some changes because DIA will find something. So I think the question is more, what's the step to make sure that if anything significant changes between now and acceptance of the water services delivery plan, that council get that back again, and we'll work through that process, and it will probably align with the development of the shareholding agreement, I would say.
So just to be clear, anything that comes back from DIA would be considered not minor and be presented back to council anyway.
Well, I think anything that I'd anticipate most things DIA come back are minor. Like if it's not, we've kind of got it wrong, which if we've got it wrong, we're better to know now, right? But the approach and the spirit of these resolutions is intended that if Ruapehu and Wanganui decide to come back on board, we're not changing our plan. They've got to build a plan that is an appendum to this plan so that we're not having to do a whole lot more work.
Following on from that, does that mean the compliance certificate that's been granted to us today is pretty much saying that what is included in here is appropriate and yeah, okay, and compliant. Yeah,
Correct.
all right. So we've got a mover. Have we got a mover and a seconder? No. Can I have a mover? Councillor Proctor, seconded by Councillor Horitapa. Thank you. I'll put those resolutions unless there's any more debate or discussion. Councillor Tamihana.
Just discussion for me. Firstly, I wanted to acknowledge our public speakers this morning for raising the significance of water, and it is a taonga. I want it recorded that water is a taonga. Clean or dirty, it's still life-giving. There are obligations we need to consider. These are legislated through Te Mana o Te Wai, so we have a responsibility around water anyway and how water is treated. I welcome collaboration, and I hear the kōrero that bigger is better, not all the time, but certainly if this bigger mechanism means reduced costs on our communities and better infrastructure to deliver critical assets to our community, then I think this is a step in the right direction. I do still raise some concerns that I hear out there from our iwi partners in regards to still feeling disconnected, so I hope that the earlier conversation has given them some assurance, and also what my fellow councillors pointed out, that there is a provision within the water services plan. I just hope that it's carried forward fruitfully and meaningfully, and that we as council ensure that that relationship's harnessed and nurtured as it goes forward. And just for any other listeners, I want them to be really clear that this isn't a decision for us council to make. This is a directive, and people need to understand that we have a job to do, but this is a directive from central government that we don't have a choice on how we deliver it, but we have to deliver something. And so if that's what we're doing here today, then that's what we do. Kia ora.
Those recommendations are on the table. Put them to the table. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, our next item of business is 7.2, Iwi Hapu Relationship Framework Adoption. Monique is going to introduce this topic, but while she does so, can we just remove recommendations A and B, that the report be received and this matter is recognised as not significant. Seconded by, did I see your hand go up? Councillor Tamihana, thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Brent. Right.
Tēnā tātou katoa, tēnei te mihi kia koutou nā mana whenua o te rohe. Ko nā kai kaunihira hoki mō o koutou tautoko ki te whakakotahi ai tātou mō tēnei anga whakawhanganga. I wanted to start by acknowledging the process and the many hands that have contributed to this work that we present to you today, and in particular acknowledging those councillors who have sat on the project advisory group for this work and our mana whenua partners, iwi and Hapu, over what has felt like a very long time and actually in reality has been a couple of years. I thought it'd be helpful to begin by talking about why we're here and remind the table that this was a key strategic priority that as governors you set for the organisation. And at the time it was described as the development of a Māori relationship framework. But as this work has evolved, you'll note that what we're presenting today is a iwi hapu relationship framework. The identification of this as a strategic priority was then set as a KPI for the Chief Executive, and my reflections and acknowledgement from that priority setting was Council acknowledging that we had a community outcome that talked about partnership with tangata whenua. We had a Māori contribution to decision-making policy that this council consulted on and adopted, but the direction from council really stalled there. There was no reference point or PO to provide clarity to everyone. So whether that be community, whether that be iwi, or whether that be us as an organisation, on what people could expect around our approach to iwi and hapu engagement. I want to reflect that there are many voices that have contributed to this work, and through this work there's been many iterations of the document, which has resulted in compromise, and as officers, I suppose our job has been to keep our feet on the tightrope, and it's our view that what we're presenting today is trying to find the balance between aspiration, sentiment and legal realities. I know that not everyone is comfortable with the final document we're presenting, and I want to particularly, in addition to the opportunities that we've had to hear feedback and questions from elected members through this process, in particular the last few weeks, I want to acknowledge the feedback from our iwi and hapu partners that I've shared with elected members. And while across that feedback there is support for this kaupapa and an acknowledgement of why Council started this process and the work that's gone into it, it is fair to acknowledge that for some of our partners, they would either like more time or there is concern about how this framework might impact the operationalisation of particularly its existing resourcing agreements or its future aspirations around partnership and agreements with this council. We have a proud history of engagement with iwi and hapu as an organisation, but we also have moments that have required the need for pause and reflection. And the intent behind this document was to be a reference point. It was to be a PO that guided our engagement and partnerships. When I think back to the challenge that Council set, the whakatauki ka mua ka muri comes to mind, because it was an acknowledgement about what had happened in the past, and what I heard from elected members was the concern about a lack of reference point, a lack of a document that provided some transparency, not just to iwi hapu in this organisation, but to community about, well, when we talk about iwi hapu engagement, what does that mean? Why do we do it? And what does it look like? The decision for Council today is, in the knowledge that until now we've had nothing other than a community outcome and a piece of policy, is what's in front of you enough? Or does it need more time, or does it need more voices to contribute to the conversation? And that's a decision for you. And while I'm presenting this report and have fronted a few of the workshops more recently, I do want to acknowledge Aroha Pāko, who I think I've managed to get into the chamber, and Brent, who have done a lot of the heavy lifting. We are happy to answer any questions and guide councillors as we navigate the decision-making process, but also happy to speak any further to the email that I provided elected members ahead of today. Thank you, Your Worship.
Questions? Councillor, just a quick one to the CE. Just that email that was sent through before, just on feedback from iwi hapu. There's probably some mixed feedback there around this framework, given the existing resourcing arrangements. Taking that feedback on, like you wouldn't say there's total confidence or support in this framework for those individual groups. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Olsen. I think the feedback reflects the journey that iwi and hapu have been on through this process. Where, and I'm sure councillors can acknowledge this, is that some of the sentiment expressed in earlier drafts of the document aren't there anymore. And I use the word that what's presented today is, I've talked about the officers walking the tightrope and presenting a balanced document. So I think some of the sentiment is expressed from the different iterations of the document, but it goes without saying, and no doubt there'll be questions about it, is that when I talk about the why and why did councillors want this work done, and we reference the word transparency, when we dig deeper on the micro why behind that was councillors wanted to understand better and concerns were being raised by iwi and hapu about the lack of transparency or the views around inequity around funding and resourcing agreements. And I think there was always the hope that this framework would resolve exactly that. And what councillors will know is that this framework doesn't resolve it. It signposts that council has an intent to reset partnership and resourcing agreements to achieve that. We just haven't got there, but we're also navigating different agreements that have different legal expectations attached to it. But I understand that it was important that councillors saw the feedback because I think that just like some of our elected members will sit around the table and feel like they've compromised or they're not, they might not be comfortable with all aspects of it, it would be fair to say that some of our iwi hapu partners certainly would have liked to see something different.
Councillor Prop.
Thanks. Just while I try and think of a question, I just want to echo the thanks for Brent and Aroha for putting this together and the hard work that they put into navigating a very difficult situation at times. And the resulting work is good. But I see this engagement framework as something like a living document and more than what is actually written on the page, and hopefully it evolves and develops in time. Is there scope for the document or the engagement framework and plan to do that? Do you think the wording in the document allows it to be living and adapt and change to the changing iwi situations and the landscape that they see themselves in as well?
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Certainly, and I was trying to be quick and find the specific reference because I feel like we use the language, this is a living document. That is the intent, and what we know is that the entities in which we have relationships with will evolve, particularly as iwi go through its settlement process or as it sees different opportunities. And I would for example, if we think about the feedback you've seen from Te Rūnanga o Raukawa, we don't have a formal relationship with the Rūnanga at the moment, and you've got the Rūnanga now saying actually we'd like that to change. And so yes, I think as our context changes, our operating environment as well, you've just signed a water services delivery plan that's going to be submitted to the government. Between that and the Systems Improvement Bill and Resource Management Act, Council's future role around leadership and iwi engagement will look very, very different, and this framework will need to reflect that. The emphasis I want to place is that the framework, while this is an important decision for Council to make, and we've put a lot of importance behind it around how Council has prioritised the work, the community outcome, partnership with tangata whenua, and the policy decision that Council made around Māori contribution to decision-making policy, those are your two legal, this triggers significance, this is what we talked to the community about, this is what we backed. The iwi hapu engagement framework does not sit the same hierarchy as that community outcome and policy, so therefore is far easier to change and reflect our changing environment.
And there being no further questions, I want to move that Council adopts the iwi/hapu relationship framework as a strategic document guiding future engagement and partnership with iwi and hapu. I have a seconder for that. Councillor Hori Te Pā, thank you. motion's on the table, and I'm more than happy to support this recommendation. And do you wish to speak to the recommendation, Councillor Barker?
I thought I'd given notice of that.
It doesn't mean to say that I can consider that, but I wanted to move recommendation C, which is the one in the paper. There's actually no notice of recommendation for C. There was an option C presented, but there was no recommendation attached to it.
Thank you. It would have been nice to know that before this particular moment. It would have given me the option to jump in and do exactly.
Well, as we've seen, there's been a number of different communications through with this topic over the last 24 hours, which meant that there was a lot of moving parts in that. And it's only in the last, I suppose, through this meeting and just prior to it, that I decided that I wanted to move that. We are speaking to the motion, yes. Councillor Tamiana.
Thank you very much. Look, I just wanted to say thank you very much, firstly, to our mana whenua, those that chose to engage in the process and sit at the table and provide their feedback and give us their considered feedback at all times, and we consider also, how council need to operate going forward. I really wanted to thank my fellow elected members, particularly those on the PAG. Rogan, I think you're here. You were really a true asset in that process, Rogan, and I thank you for that, and also to you, Mike and Nina, as well. I think that there were hard conversations had, but it was good to be able to have and share those conversations with my fellow elected members. Also, a huge thanks to Aroha and Brent. Can't say enough about the work, and Monique for your leadership, giving them time. I think, for me, I want to celebrate the work to date, doing something that we were told was too hard. I want to celebrate collaboration and some clarity and transparency that our community will now see that's been asked for so clearly. I want to celebrate that it's a living document and that we as a council committed to this process as one of our top priorities. I have no fear in adopting this framework or this policy today. In fact, I think it will nothing but strengthen our future relationships and our engagement, and will give our leadership clear parameters on which and how we're going to engage all our mana whenua in the future. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the work that's been done. Kia ora.
Deputy Mayor Allen.
Mr. Mayor, I speak also in support of the motion on the table. It's a bit confusing talking about option C because there's also another option C, which is about the consultation issue. And that's the particular one I want to address and to oppose, and to give my reasons for doing so. I believe consultation is not appropriate in this case, because this document is about the how. It's not about the what. The what is what we dealt with when we looked at the long-term plan in year one of this triennium, when we looked at the community outcomes that we valued and which we consulted on. Among them was partnership with Māori, that fully consulted on, fully embraced, and in fact, symbolically and importantly, it sits at the top of the 5 community outcomes on our table and in front of us every time that we meet. So that consultation has been done. This is simply about the how. It's how we can have a better, more coherent way of dealing with our partnership, of embracing our partnership, replacing the current ad hoc arrangements which lack transparency. Those points have already been noted today. This is about bringing coherence and transparency to how we deliver our partnership. And as such, Mr. Mayor, I fully support the motion on the table.
Just for clarity, in terms of options and recommendations, we need to make sure that councillors understand that there are options. There's only been one recommendation, and that is the recommendation that we are moving. Right. So it's not an or an and recommendation either. So there's no recommendation that says C
1, 2, and 3 type of thing. It is one recommendation.
Understood, Mr. Mayor. The confusion, I guess, is around the fact that there is an option C, which is around consultation. That is not part of the recommendation on the table. I accept that, but I wanted to foreshadow my opposition to any discussion around the consultation, which will form part of this debate, I suppose. So just for clarification.
Thank you. Councillor J.
Yeah, that was a point of clarification. I was requesting that in moving the motion that you have, it excludes any public consultation or notification process is what you've moved. It's essentially just adopt it, it becomes an operation. Okay.
So why was option C even in there?
Yes.
Chief Executive is going to clarify for us.
So option C is an option available to council. What's happened is the Mayor has used standing orders to move option A, and option A in the report, which is recommendation C in the report. So, apologies. Learning for us is we need to use numbers for one and letters for another, because I can see how it becomes confusing. But in terms of meeting process, Mayor Burney has, using his powers as chair, got ahead of you and moved recommendation C, which is option A.
Thank you for explaining that.
If it fails, then what the Chief Executive could help you with is craft a recommendation for option C into a recommendation.
Yeah. In effect, you're scuttling the option for public consultation before it's actually adopted, and I think the way you've gone about it is actually shoddy and disgraceful.
I'd reject that completely, and all I'm doing is actually moving the recommendation that is contained within the report. If the recommendation fails, then obviously the discussion is around other options that are included in the report. And that is exactly the same that happens with most recommendations and resolutions that are put to the table. They either pass or they fail, and then we move on. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the resolution? Councillor Barker.
Yes, thank you. So, just give me a refresh. The resolution says, could you sum it?
The resolution says that we adopt the iwi-Hapu relationship framework as a strategic document guiding future engagement and partnership with iwi and Hapu.
Okay, I'll keep it simple. I was on the PAG from the get-go. I've lodged this objection from the get-go, and I'll continue to lodge it. And the reason I wanted this to go to public consultation is because in adopting this framework, you're adopting two provisions that allow for unelected representation and co-governance. The reason I wanted there to be public consultation on that is because those are very important principles as part of democracy. Obviously, there is no will here to consult with the public about that, even though you would consult with them about something like UMO. To me, adopting this framework with those provisions in place is to spit in the face of democracy, and I will not do that.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, first I do want to acknowledge the Chief Executive and staff for attempting to reflect, I guess, a wide range of feedback, and some of it quite directly conflicting. And I totally appreciate it hasn't been an easy task to navigate that in terms of the document that's been produced. And so your efforts are certainly acknowledged and appreciated. And I think that's the thing, is that we have a document that probably does now attempts to try and bridge those two different perspectives that you referred to, Monique, which was,
I guess one worldview that's like really grounded in legal and democratic frameworks, really focused on clarity, transparency, consistency with those statutory obligations and context. And then probably another worldview which is far more aspirational, based on I guess more ideology and probably driven by the personal views of some of the members of that working group, and I understand why that's the case. And I guess I wanted to, in terms of this debate, be really clear that I really do support having meaningful, respectful, mutually beneficial relationships with iwi. I think that's really important. And I supported the concept of this document because I wanted clarity around the funding, resourcing, and how that engagement would take place across a range of activities that council does. And to be honest, my starting point for this piece of work stemmed from a problem under the previous chief executive, where agreements were signed with iwi partners without transparency and knowledge of the elected member table. And so that was resourcing agreements, partnership agreements, resource consent to decide agreements. And for me, that was the issue, is that there was no transparency, no clear methodology, no drive for accountability and clarity. So when we started out with this piece of work, like I believed in the mission in terms of, or the goal, because for me it was about resetting expectations, providing that transparency and consistency, clearly defining sort of an agreed framework for engagement approaches across our range of activities, whether it's from organising a council event through to a really significant decision on water services delivery, as an example. And I really hoped that we were going to tackle the idea of actually clarifying what we meant by partnership in the local government context, and also, most probably important for me, was to really be clear about the methodology for how we were to determine the annual resourcing and funding commitment, because that's critical to then understanding what the budget allocation should be that we then agree through a long-term plan. And so for me, where we've landed in terms of the document, yes, there's elements I'm really comfortable with and I'm happy about, and there are other parts that I don't like, and I feel like there is a real missed opportunity. And I think that's probably the issue, and I've got a range of points here, and I'll try and summarise them in more briefly than I intended. But we have the community outcome that talks about honouring the treaty. We have, in partnership with iwi, we have our Māori contributions to decision-making policy that talks about extending beyond our legislative obligations. As concepts, they're words on a piece of paper, and I really had hoped that this project, this work stream, was going to really attempt to actually amplify those and clarify what we actually mean by those things, because I want to understand how far we're going, what's the impact, what's the opportunity, what's the cost, what's the how does it connect with that whole framework for democratic accountability. And so for me, there's a really missed opportunity, because that's where, and I disagree with Deputy Mayor Allen, that this document is an extension of those really, really critical documents in terms of community outcomes, significance policy, Māori contribution to decision making. This illuminates those things, or purports to illuminate some of the things, without actually defining and really articulating where we want to end up with some of these phrases and some of these words. And so I've called it the cost of vagueness. You know, that's the issue. We're going to end up with a document that is still really vague on some of these issues. And I take a different view around how it connects and how relevant it is to our significance and engagement policy, but I won't get into that as an argument. And so I have to say, Mr. Mayor, I'm disappointed, and Deputy Mayor Allen, I'm disappointed that you take the position that that it is not sensible to at least go out with a public notification process and seek the views of our community. And it kind of made me think in the moment. About 4 weeks ago, I put up a notice of motion around doing a community poll. And I live by the decision around that was defeated. But the reason it advanced at that point was our public might get confused about too many questions, and it might distract from the conversation around Māori wards. Kind of this inference that, well, yeah, we don't want to overwhelm our community. And now, by saying we don't want to go to a public notification or consultation process on what is something that is really, really, I do think is important that we get a range of perspectives on, we're now saying, actually, we don't want to do that because we fear that there might be division, there might be polarizing statements, there might be some things that we don't want to hear or don't want to see. And I reject that advice in the council paper that says that is a valid concern and a valid reason for not doing this. I absolutely reject it. And for me, this is important because ultimately this framework sets the context for resourcing and funding iwi groups to the tune of around, at the moment, the commitment's around $840,000 a year, which is nearly 1.5% of our rates spend. And it's important that people have the opportunity to understand the framework that we're intending to operate under and why we think it's important, why we think resourcing is important, and how it actually relates to the engagement activities that we need to do, and that there is obviously, it's entirely appropriate and justified for doing. And so, I'm actually really, really quite frustrated and cross that you're not even willing to have an open conversation with our public. I actually think it's really, really disappointing is the word I can only use, because I think we can have trust in our public to actually lean into some of these conversations, whether it's about a community poll question or whether it's about this framework. I genuinely did want to hear what people had to say, because if the feedback was overwhelmingly in support, I'd accept that, and then I would put aside my own concerns about the document and potentially support it, just like I did with Māori wards. You know, I came to the table a few years ago when around the decision around establishing Māori wards. I had personal views that I didn't want to establish a Māori ward, but I went through the submission process. I listened to it. I was convinced by the people speaking on the day. I was convinced by the submissions. I was convinced by the numbers, and so I supported it. And so that's what, in doing what you've done, you've deprived the opportunity to, you've deprived me of the opportunity to be persuaded that this document is fit for purpose and is the right thing to do. So, finally, our job as public representatives is to facilitate discussion and debate and a range of views, and not to suppress it. And so, I trust our community, and I don't want to shield them from what is potentially a challenging and hard conversation, but we should totally have it. Anyway, I'm getting a signal from the mayor that I should wrap it up. So, look, I support meaningful engagement and really solid relationships with iwi, but they've got to be clear, consistent, and within that context, legal context. And so, for me, public consultation was absolutely non-negotiable, and so the fact that we've that the motion on the table excludes that means I absolutely have to vote against this, unfortunately.
Okay. Councillor Olsen.
Jonathan was a bit slow. For me, I guess for me, I've always wanted transparency from the start. When we first had this discussion, I think 1.5% of our rates, or $840,000, it goes into resourcing this. So I think it's fair. We are transparent with our ratepayers around this figure. I am comfortable, however, that this will bring agreements into line with each other, so we can actually have that transparency, and people will have a little bit better oversight. I too would have liked some sort of public input into this, whether it was a full consultation or whatever, but just some sort of feedback, I guess, mechanism to gauge what people thought, I guess, more than anything. But over and above, I am comfortable with the fact that we will get some transparency and alignment, I guess, with different resourcing agreements as we progress.
Councillor Browning.
Yeah, so I'm very similar to Councillor Olsen. I would like to also have seen some kind of public interaction regarding this, similar to what we've done with the endowment fund policy in Foxton. I think it would have been extremely helpful, and disappointingly we haven't chosen to do that. However, that's not enough for me to not support this, because this is work that I think has been going on now for so long. At some stage we have to get to a point where we have a framework to work for. It's a living document that can be changed, and I think Councillor Olsen touched on it, that it is a document that's now going to be out in the public face, and the public face will be able to access the document, understand its relevance and its importance, and be informed accordingly. So that gives me some degree of comfort. Not perfect, but I think it's time to adopt, make it work. I take what Monika sent through earlier today, that it's even on the Hapu side, it's not completely what you're comfortable with, but it's again, I guess, a living document, work in progress, and will give us some guidance, and certainly officers the ability to work alongside the framework, which has got to be a good thing. So again, not perfect, but I will be supporting it.
Councillor Proctor.
I think my initial starting comment is the Māori engagement framework is a good thing. It's a good thing to happen for this organisation. And if I think back to when I was first elected onto this council, the community elected 4 Māori onto this council, and it shows how advanced our community is in wanting that partnership and wanting Māori representation in our organisation. And in contrast to that, I was a little shocked to come onto this council and then realise that we do not have any iwi or Māori members represented on various committees, or co-opted to committees as well. And I also saw a lack of Māori in leadership roles within this organisation as well. And so I thought, yes, the engagement framework is a very good thing. It's something that's needed. I think staff here need the support to guide them on engaging with Māori and increasing participation for Māori in local government as well. However, as we have progressed, we've moved from a Māori engagement framework into an iwi and hapu engagement framework. The language in the document, some of the appendices have become quite prescriptive and constrained, and probably allowed iwi to almost fear this document and almost feel a little bit worried about how this document will affect them and their relationships and their aspirations within their own iwi and hapu as well. And so I think that's a bit of the cold response that we see in some of the responses from the iwi in the latest email. And I was wondering if a little bit more time would be more helpful to affirm with iwi that this engagement framework is a living document. It is something that's not going to be restrictive and constrain that relationship and provide that nice colonial lens on how that relationship should develop over time. However, it is what it is, and I fall heavily on the fact that my initial thoughts stand that this is a good document. It's a good thing to have a Māori engagement framework. It would be nice if we didn't have to rush option C so much, recommendation C so much, and have a little bit more time to test the waters with our iwi. But I suppose our job is to make a decision. Still haven't made up my mind which way I'm going to go yet.
Anyone that hasn't spoken who wishes to?
Councillor Proctor, we've been discussing this important piece of work since October of 2023. We've had elected members that have shaped and devised and co-designed in collaboration with our iwi partners this document that sits in front of us for adoption today. Mike, I hear your desire and your consistent desire throughout the whole process for public consultation. I think the reality, though, Mike, is that the work that's gone into shaping this, the feedback that's been taken from elected members and iwi partners, it has been refined. And ultimately, at the end of the day, 3 years ago, almost to the day, most of us were elected to lead on behalf of our community and to make decisions and to sometimes make hard decisions on behalf of our community for what is the betterment for the region and of people within our regions. I believe that this document in front of us sets out and achieves the fundamental purpose of what we wanted to. I also accept at both ends of the spectrum it isn't ideally what you want or what they want, which way you want to put around it. But what this is this is a start of a living document that as relationships develop over time and as more government legislation comes in that influences one decision over the other or one core service over another core service, this provides daylight into a scenario around funding and how we work with our iwi partners, whereas 3 years ago potentially it wasn't out in the sun. It's here. I believe that it does provide enough guidance for it to become operational. I do not feel that as elected members that we should necessarily need to consult, and I wouldn't have supported a vote to consult at this point in time. So I will support the motion as put by me, Bernie.
You're on? Oh, Councillor Boyle. Sorry, I haven't seen your hand raised, Councillor Boyle, but you wish to speak?
That's all right. Yeah, I'll do a quick one. I think pretty much everything has been said already. This is a good document. For me, it's diluted to a point where it should even be acceptable to those councillors around the table who have Hobson's Pledge style views. The provisions Councillor Barber referenced are falsehoods around co-governance. There's a definition of it in there. Of course we need to define it. Even if we want to not do it, we need to define it. I think it's pretty important that we vote by division on this one and that the public takes note of those councillors and their thinly veiled views on if we should appropriately work with our iwi partners or not. In terms of community feedback, I'm confident that our iwi partners and community could rally together and convince the minority at the table that we really need to do this, but they shouldn't have to fight against the strong and powerful organised right-wing movement that would surely respond to that. Let's get on and make this decision. It's been too long coming. It's a palatable document for us. It's a palatable document for iwi. It's a start and it's a step in the right direction.
Look, I don't want to add anything more other than to say, I mean, for some years we operated in the dark, as Councillor Grimstone referenced. No one knew what our relationships were, what our arrangements were. The whole purpose of trying to get a framework initiated was to ensure that the public did have clarity, that they did understand what we were doing in terms of trying to ensure that we had those effective and I think enduring relationships that we need to ensure that we continue to do. This is a foundation document. It's not the be-all and end-all. It's the start. And so I think this is a practical demonstration of our aspiration to ensure that we do have good relations and enduring relationships into the future. So am comfortable to support it. And the fact that we are now going to give clarity to the next term in terms of how they deal with those sorts of arrangements, and even despite the feedback that we've had from some who want to continue with some of those arrangements, at least it will allow those conversations to be had, knowing that we've got a framework within that we can deal with. So a division has been called for. And I'm going to ask Grayson to put that up. So, Deputy Mayor Allen.
For.
Councillor Barker. Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Brannigan.
For.
Councillor Grimstone.
For.
Councillor Horace Parr.
For.
Councillor Jennings.
Against.
Councillor Olsen.
For.
Councillor Proctor.
For.
Councillor Tamihana. And I am for, and Councillor Young is absent. So the motion is carried. Thank you very much. All right. We are moving on to item 8.1, which is the Council Resolution and Actions Monitoring Report for August 2025. I'll move that this report be received and noted. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Allen. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Any items on that report that councillors wish to seek clarification or ask questions on? There being none, we will move to exclude the public under the Local Government Official Information Meetings Act 1987. That the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings. C1, to a decision to sell the Levin Warehouse car park, and C2, Council Resolution and Actions Monitoring Report for August 2025. So moved. Any kind of second for that? Deputy Mayor Allen, all those in favour? Against? Carried.